Hi guys, Arthur here from Homeowner DIY. In this video, I'm going to be doing a coolant flush on a 2001 Buick Regal. So for GM vehicles back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I believe this 3800 Series 2 V6 engine was a very common engine. It's a Dexcool system. This car is barely driven, but it's been 5 years. And they say maximum 5 years for Dexcool. Guys, keep one thing in mind, that any fluid, no matter how much is used, with age, it's going to start to break down and it's going to lose its effectiveness. So what we'll do now is material and tools. Alright, this is the materials list. So I have 3 gallons of Dexcool. This car's capacity is 11 liters or 11.7 quarts. Thermostat. Guys, we'll talk about the thermostat, what I came across. So if you come across this issue as well, you'll be prepared for it. Penetrating fluid, degreaser, paper towel, and then gloves. This is what I believe I need for material on this job. So what we'll do now is look at 2 types of thermostats. Alright, these are the 2 thermostats that I bought. I bought the one on the left first, and then I realized that it doesn't have a gasket. I don't know why this one didn't come with a gasket, but this one did come with the gasket. So the price difference between these 2 is about $30. I would use this one and buy the gasket separately if that is possible. But at this point now, I'm just going to use this one because it has a gasket, and I'll return the other one. So for Dexcool, they say that you can run this coolant for 5 years. So every 5 years you need to do a coolant flush. I would recommend putting in a brand new gasket instead of reusing the old one, because for 5 years, $30 is not worth being stuck by the side of the road. Alright, this is a tools list. So I have a pan and a funnel. Make sure that you're not using the same pan that you use for oil changes, because if you have contaminated coolant, they may not take it to recycling. Also, make sure that you have more than 1 container on hand, just in case, because there's a fair bit of fluid in the system. Channel locks, needle nose pliers, a hose with a spout, socket set. Also be prepared for maybe needing flathead screwdrivers as well, an extension cord, a light, and then cardboard on the far right. So you may also want to use safety glasses, but that'll be up to you. Alright, so we'll go over the parts of the cooling system for this engine. So this is a 3800 Series 2 V6. So we have our radiator cap, our radiator. The drain is on the bottom right. This is our upper radiator hose. Our thermostat housing is here with a vent at the top. This is the reservoir. Back here are the heater core lines that go to the heater core, and then the water pump is down here. This is the basic parts of the cooling system for this engine. Alright guys, before we even start, make sure that the car is cold whenever you're going to do a transmission fluid flush. I know it's common sense, but it needs to be said. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some penetrating fluid on the thermostat housing bolts. So we have 1 bolt here, another one here, and then we have the vent. Give the penetrating fluid some time to work its magic. So spray it first and then give it 10 minutes or however long it takes you to get back to this point before you try to crack the bolts loose. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take off the plug at the bottom of the radiator to start draining out the system. Okay, so the plug is just above here. I took the 2 bolts out just to stretch this back to make it easier to see. So you see in the corner where the plug is. So this is a 17 millimeter. It's a wing nut, but you can put a 17 millimeter socket on it. And then there's a drain hole here, and then the other hole here. So crack the plug loose and then slide a pan underneath to start catching the coolant. Now, because the radiator cap is still on, there is no vent, so this is going to start dripping slowly. Alright, so I have this starting to drip out now. So what I'm going to do is undo the radiator cap, and that's going to break the airlock and allow this to drain out faster. Okay, so the radiator cap can be taken off, which will introduce air into the system. So to start off with, you can see how dirty this is, and it's probably going to be throughout the entire system like this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down, open the sump plug more, and allow the system to drain out. And now we have a nice stream that is going through the drain hole at the bottom. So I'm going to let this drain out, and I'm going to start looking at the reservoir, take it out and clean it out. Okay, so there are two nuts here that are 10 millimeter. These ones I didn't even spray. To remove the reservoir, the black bar needs to be loosened off. The two bolts there need to be loosened off so the reservoir can be slid out. Alright, so just give it a shot of penetrating oil. For these ones, it might not be necessary. So these are 13 millimeter. Okay, so for the reservoir, we'll have to pull the tube that goes to the radiator off. So make sure that you drain the tube out. And this is our reservoir. Alright, so this is the reservoir. Now, the reason that it's so dirty is this is what happens when you mix Dexcool, which is orange, and ethanol glycol coolant, which is green. Never mix the two because it turns into a sludge. And I haven't been able to clean this out. I mean, it's horrible. And once again, we have the radiator cap, and you can just see how filthy it is. This is what happens when you mix Dexcool and green ethanol glycol together. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to drain this out. The radiator plug, I'm now going to take out as well because the system has been drained out. At least the radiator has been drained out. So I'm going to remove the plug. I'm going to clean out the reservoir here, as well as make sure that this is in good shape. I don't think there is an issue because I did see coolant run out the bottom down here when I lifted it up, so that means there's no blockage, so this is still in good shape. Alright, so I washed off the reservoir. I put some tap water through it. So this sludge here I can't remove. The easiest thing to do would be to buy a brand new reservoir. I've tried this so many times and I can't remove. So the radiator is still draining. It's been draining for a little while now. I don't know if this is related to the sludge, but I'm going to put the reservoir back in. Then I'll wipe up the radiator cap, wipe that off, and then we're going to look at removing our thermostat from the thermostat housing. Okay, so to reinstall the reservoir, this cutout here will go to this cone looking thing right here. So this will slide right over it, and then slide it over the two rods sticking out, and then tighten this back down, and then the reservoir will be reinstalled. Okay, so the vent on the thermostat housing is 7 millimeter, and then the two thermostat housing bolts are 10 millimeter. It's had a while to soak in with the penetrating fluid. So open the vent, you don't have to take it out, and then do the two 10 millimeter on the housing. And guys, make sure you move the pan to be underneath the thermostat housing to catch the coolant. Alright, the two bolts can be removed, so be aware that they are not the same type of bolt. So this one here will go on the bottom. Alright, so this is our thermostat. Alright, with the thermostat removed, you can see the debris at the bottom. So make sure that you clean this out with a paper towel. I'm gonna use paper towel and a little bit of degreaser. So lift this up, make sure that the coolant drains out from the upper hose here. Once again, this side here can be cleaned up. Alright, so before I put the thermostat housing back together, I'm going to spray a little bit of degreaser onto a paper towel. And just wipe everything down. Alright, because there's so much sludge, I'm going to quickly wipe this out. This is the same paper towel that I used to clean the housing, so it has some degreaser on it. And then clear the sludge off of this as well. Alright, with this cleaned out, our radiator cap, clean it off, get any sludge off it. And then inspect the gasket here and the gasket here. Make sure that everything's in good shape, that you don't see any pitting or deterioration. If you do, replace the radiator cap. Okay, so I have my hose. I'm going to pour water down the top here. So I've emptied out my pan from the coolant that was in the radiator. And this is where I mean that you should probably have extra containers on hand. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to run some water through the radiator. And you guys don't need a lot of pressure. You just need a good flow. When either filling the radiator with coolant or flushing it out with a garden hose, be careful about not splashing water all over the place because there is the battery and other electronics nearby. Alright, so I'm going to send water through this tube here. So just close the vent by hand and then run some water through the hose. With the engine running, when this rubber hose is hot, that means the thermostat has popped open. If you put your hand on this hose and it's still cold, that means the thermostat has not popped open and you're not at operating temperature yet. Alright, I'm now going to send water through the block and the heater core. So for the heater core, turn the key to the on position. The temperature, turn it to maximum. The fan, turn it to maximum as well. This is going to open the heater core and it's going to allow water to flow through the block and the heater core. Alright, now we'll send water through the block. You'll hear water flowing out of the drain plug at the radiator. So run water for maybe a minute or two and that should be enough for a system of this size. So notice that you can hear the water when it starts draining out of the radiator through the plug. And now the heater core can be shut back off. Okay, the radiator plug is tightened back up, so I'm going to start refilling the system. So I'm going to start with the block, and I'm going to keep filling it until I see coolant sitting here. So I'll put our funnel in. Now this is our coolant. It says do not add water, 50/50 pre-diluted GM vehicles. That's what this is. So fill slowly so you don't make a big mess. Alright, so we see coolant in the block. Now we can replace our thermostats. So I forgot to mention this, but always compare your old and new parts together. So the new thermostat has a hole right here. There you see it. So the hole, I don't think it really matters where it goes. There's no type of indentation or marking. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the hole in the 10 o'clock position. So put the thermostat in, push it down. And now the thermostat housing can be put back into place. So for the bolts, I would suggest go back and forth until they are snug. But don't be overly aggressive with these bolts because they're not that big. Okay, so with the block filled, or somewhat filled for that matter, we're going to fill up the radiator. So make sure that the vent is open so the air that is trapped inside will at least go out the vent. Once the radiator is filled, I'll fill up the reservoir. Okay, so we see coolant at the top of the neck, so we know that the radiator is full at this point. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and start the car. The radiator cap is off and the vent is cracked open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start running coolant through the system and allow the two places for air to leave before I go out and do a test drive. Alright, I'm going to start the car and start circulating the coolant. So I'm also going to turn up the heater core to maximum and allow the coolant to cycle. Now guys, make sure that you open the garage door or pipe the exhaust outside. Don't be running a car in an enclosed space. And now we'll allow the engine to cycle the coolant. So right away the coolant in the radiator went down. This is why you want to leave the cap off to give the air a place to go. Alright, I shut off the heater core so it's easier to hear me. I'm going to take the car for a quick spin. Guys, stay close to the house in case you have a problem. You're going to be able to limp back to the house. If you drive too far away and you have a problem, you can get yourself into trouble. But I'm going to take the car for a spin, get it up to operating temperature, and then I'm going to come back. So we're going to open the vents. When opening the vent, be extremely careful because if you loosen it too much and it actually is loosened off, it could potentially pop off, spewing hot coolant everywhere. Alright, so I'm going to take off the radiator cap. Make sure that you use a thick towel or some type of barrier when you take this off. So with the radiator cap removed, I'm going to refill the radiator with coolant to the very top. With the vent open, you're waiting until you have a consistent stream of coolant coming out. You see the bubbling, this means that there's still air. Once there's a consistent stream, all the air has been removed. Alright guys, so when it comes to the coolant, make sure that you put it into containers and take it to a recycler. Don't just leave this out. Especially when you're doing your job as well, make sure that if you walk away that you secure the area where animals won't get to this stuff because it's highly toxic. And make sure you recycle it at the proper facility as well. Alright guys, so that concludes the DIY version of a coolant flush for a 3800 Series 2 engine. I bought 3 gallons of coolant and I only used about half of it, which means half the engine is full of water, but I've done this multiple times on this car over the 20-year period that we've had it and I've never had an issue. Even though it says do not dilute, I mean you're technically doing it by running water through the system, but you're not able to get all the water out. The time on this job. The time was about 2 hours, so it'll take a little bit of time to allow the water to drip out of the radiator to clean everything up. Depending on how far you want to go, it can take longer, but I would say it is pretty safe to say about 2 hours for a system this big. The cost of this job. The coolant, the thermostat, and the consumables, the gloves, paper towels, the cost was about $120. So guys, it says here either 5 years or 240,000 kilometers. For my American friends, I believe that's about 150,000 miles. On average, it's about 20,000 kilometers driving is what they say for a person. So you're gonna hit your 5 years more than likely before you hit your 240,000 kilometers. But again, make sure that you do your coolant flush, do your fluid changes at the interval specifies to make sure that you don't run into any issues and premature wear. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. I hope something here is going to help you on your project when you need to go ahead and do that. Guys, till next time, please hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next project.